Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wrike Tech Club, which is a series of meetups and events that we are running at Wrike as a company. Thank you so much for being with us today. For some of you, I know it's morning. For some of you, it's evening. No matter what, we're very happy that you're here because we're going to have a very nice panel today. I will just jump in with a couple of words about Wrike as a company. In case you don't know about Wrike, you never heard about Wrike. Wrike is a project management tool, a cloud-based tool for collaborative work management, which is very, very relevant in days of COVID and pandemic. And today we are having a panel discussion on product design. Some of my colleagues are joining the panel, if you saw it on meetup.com, and we also have some outstanding speakers from outstanding companies, so stay tuned. The discussion will be for about 1.5 hours to 2 hours, so we hope you can be with us till the very end. If you have any questions, please use the YouTube chat and ask us anything, and ask the speakers anything you would want to. We see the chat, we can answer the questions accordingly. And also, if you can't make it till the very end of the discussion, the recording will be available to you on our YouTube channel, so subscribe to our YouTube channel and you can find the recording there afterwards. So let me introduce our moderator for today's discussion. It's my colleague, Chris. Hello, Chris.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I was the sole UX writer at Wrike for about a year, but this week our team just grew to 2 people, and I am the host of the Prague UX Writers Meetup group, where we host talks and discussions. I'm usually based out of Prague, Czech Republic, but right now I am in San Francisco.
Okay. So Chris will be introducing the rest of the speakers. I'm putting myself on mute, so have a nice discussion, Chris.
All right, well, we are here to talk about how to build a strong design team. So let's go ahead and meet some of our panelists. First off, we've got Valerie Karnes from GitLab. Hey, Valerie.
Hi, Christopher. How are you?
Good, good. How are you? So why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm the director of product design at GitLab. I've been there for just over 2 years. Before that, I worked at a tech company for over 7 years, believe it or not, which is a really long time. A lot of people comment on that. And prior to that, I worked at several agencies. So I have a little bit of a background of in-house and agency and growing teams, and from small to large. So I am ready for your questions.
Nice. Well, welcome, and thank you so much. Next, we've got Vladimir Končar from Kiwi. How you doing, Vladimir?
Hey there. Hey, everybody who joined the meetup. I'm doing fine.
Great. Awesome. Awesome. Well, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah. Look, I'm director of design at kiwi.com. I've been around in design field for the last 20 years. So been doing a lot of agency work, working, across Europe and on US market, and joined Kiwi a year and a half ago, actually, when the pandemic started. So it was like really fun experience to join at that point. And overall, I have a mix of really hands-on experience with design, from branding, building products, and also with team, growing, managing, coaching. So it's gonna be fun to talk about all those topics we have today.
Great, cool. Well, welcome. Next up, we've got Dominique Ward from Atlassian.
Hello.
Hello, Dominique. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good. Do you want to give us a bit of an intro about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Dominique. I am head of design operations at Atlassian. I've been in design operations or design strategy of some sort for the last 15 years.
Cool.
I spent a good chunk of that time at global innovation consultancy Frog Design, where I kind of cut my teeth in figuring out how design teams work and how do you actually build and scope projects and deliver great work. And so I'm really excited to talk to this great panel of people.
Wonderful. Welcome. Thank you for coming. And last but certainly not least, we have my boss, Umberto Abate from Wrike. Hey, Umberto.
Hi. Hi, Chris.
How's it going?
Good, thank you.
Good, cool. Why don't you give a quick intro about yourself?
Yes, I joined Wrike not long ago, in last November, as a head of design. And prior to that, I was at Autodesk, and where I stayed for, I led the design team as I was director there for 3 years, I think in total, yeah. Prior to that, I was in a startup in financial services, one of the neobanks in the UK. And prior to that, I've been for 7 years at Skype, and also half of that was part of Microsoft. I'll stop there.
Very cool. Well, thank you very much. All right, so how this is going to work is we're going to start each topic with a quick presentation from one of our panelists, and then I'll follow up with a couple questions, and we'll have some discussion around the topic. So let's get started today with a strong processes topic. So Umberto, why don't you go ahead?
Sure, thank you. I have a few slides to help me out here with some concepts. So let me share the screen. Can you see?
I see myself.
Can you see a presentation or just a wallpaper?
I see myself blown up very big. I don't know about you guys. It's very flattering, but you know.
Wait, let's see if we can make this work.
Hey, Anita, can we?
In case you didn't know, Christopher, you are the presentation.
Wonderful.
Is it better now? Okay, let me switch monitors and maybe that works.
It's been a little over a year into the pandemic, and we're still having the fun tech issues.
Does this work now? Can you see a deck, some form? Or you still see it? No. Well,
We still see Chris as you know the main process here.
Hey, Anita, can we get this working?
Nothing? I don't know why this is not working. Great.
Anita in private chat is saying go ahead without the presentation. All right, so you'll have to look at me.
Can you see
Unless we can get Umberto as the main person, that would be great.
Can you see the presentation now?
No, just go ahead without the presentation, Umberto.
Okay.
Sorry, but Anita saying go ahead. Sorry about that.
Okay. So yes, what I wanted to share today is that processes depend on the different organization models, and so I'm used to see, like, I've seen different types of organizations, but mainly can be described as centralized, distributed and autonomous, and distributed and connected. Centralized is where the design team, the UX team, it works a little bit like an internal agency for the design organization, for the larger organization. So they kind of provide a service of design for other departments. So it's a little bit like, you know, an agency model. This creates a strong internal cohesion, where there is usually a high level of quality for the practice. But there is also a risk of creating a little bit of what could be perceived as an ivory tower. And sometimes it also comes with the risk of creating a weaker end-to-end ownership on the product, and like with, you know, that phenomenon of throwing something over the fence and hoping that the developers are going to build it as designed. So like the communication, the cross-functional communication, of course, suffers from this model. A second model is the one where designers are distributed and autonomous. Typically, there will be full members and owners in cross-functional teams. It could be that there isn't really a design function in that case, or like with management and other things that connect them together. And so the risk there is that the discipline growth could be there could be a low investment in the discipline growth. So while things are owned end to end, so like usually good designers in this model can do really, really well. The portfolio could suffer from lack of cohesion, right? Standards and like keeping like, design language and operations like design systems and so on is something that will be harder to do in a model of that type. Which leads us to the third model, where is a hybrid, like where there is a design function, and most of the members of the design function are embedded in teams and are full owners of teams, but there are processes and avenues for designers and other UX functions to get together to discuss things, to establish operations goals, and advance the different disciplines and create also design more organically, like with the possibility to create impact not just at the team level but at the organization level. So of course this is the one that once it's well set up could yield to the best results, but it's a lot of work and it's not easy to create that balance. So also in this case there are risks. I also wanted to touch on how this hybrid model could work. So like most likely there is a designer, a generalist designer embedded in the team, or maybe two designers could be embedded in the cross-functional team with maybe more of some specialism, typically somebody more working on the early discovery, research, conceptual models, and somebody more closer to the craft. And then there could be, so you could imagine a designer or two for each of the teams, and there could be people there support them as a shared function. So like UX research, UX writing, design tech. If the resources allow it, it would be great to have one of this person, the specialist as well for each of the teams. Most often than not, it's hard to have that level of resources. So like we need to think about how to enable all teams to do well with that level of specialism. Again, by all means, I would recommend not to create an agency model with UX research, UX writing, design technology, but to try to think about quick rotations across teams, but for the period of time, those functions that are shared are actually fully dedicated, and like they interact as full members of the teams, and then they rotate over. This model also benefits from having in the team both generalists and specialists, right? I touched on that. Like if you think about the design spectrum with a number of skills like research and definition of value, architecture and thinking in systems, content and words, interactions, computation, graphic and motion, right? This design spectrum is pretty large. So product designers in this model do very well when they can cover to an extent the full spectrum, and then maybe they have one aspect or two where they are really, really capable, where the bar is really high. It's kind of hard to find somebody that can do everything, at the excellence level, meeting that bar. So that T-shaped is something that you will look for, someone that you want to be a great cross-functional partner embedded in the team.
Hey, Umberto, sorry, we gotta wrap it up. Do you want to summarize real quick the rest of what you had? Sure. Sorry about that.
Sure. No, I mean I'm basically finished. The point here is that it's important to create this cross-functional partnership and look at functional excellence. So these are the two aspects that really like design processes for that. Yeah.
Okay, great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate it. Sorry we couldn't get your presentation working. I know that's always a bummer. So I do have some questions here. I'd love to hear from some of our other panelists. So I'm going to ask one person the question first, and then we'll open it up and we can just generally discuss it. So first off, Vladimir. It's really easy for design teams to get so excited about solving a problem that they just want to jump straight into building it. How do we make sure that we give the discovery phase enough time so we don't jump into delivery too soon?
Thanks for the question. It's like a really important one, as we tend to jump to conclusions, especially like in high-paced environments. We tend to kind of really go with our assumptions and gut feelings sometimes, but it's really important to kind of like insist on some processes. So when we think about like what Umberto actually mentioned as how the teams are organized and the processes we built, we actually need to enable our teams to make decisions. This is like the core, why the teams are organized in which way, who reports to what. They need to be able to kind of like have a system that kind of like enables them to make a decision. And then when you have this accountability of the team who actually discuss like or actually identify those areas or ideas with research or with our customers, then you're able to kind of prioritize those issues and put them in the discovery. When you put them in discovery, there's different ways you can kind of handle them. So prior to jumping to conclusion that this could actually work, we are still in that chaos period of our process. Like we are trying to pull something from all those ideas and kind of prioritize them. So we need to kind of like, put a break, have that collaboration between different, I would say, parts of the team. So like product management, engineering, design. Figure out like what's the best way to handle this idea, how to kind of discover it clearly, how to validate it, like whether it's going to take like a month of doing research, whether it can be done like in a week or 3 if you have the volumes of the traffic, so we can kind of like really A/B test the idea. So there are different ways. It's just a matter that the team needs to insist and not jump to conclusion that this could work because like, our biases tells us, oh, if I have a problem, this is probably something that all our users have problems. So we jump to conclusion. So this is like where the process is really important. So we can question things. We don't like put them, we don't have the answers. We need to question. So that's kind of in short.
Great insights. Yeah, thank you very much. Hey, anybody else? Anybody got any insights, anything they want to jump in and talk about for the question of how to make sure we're giving the discovery phase enough time so we don't jump into delivery too soon?
Sure, I'll chime in. The way that I like to think about it is what's the smallest, or what is the question, right? What is the problem that we're trying to solve for? Start with that. And then what is the minimum amount of information that we need in order to move forward? Because if you can break it down that small, then you can move forward quickly while maybe doing that longer term research that you need. So is there a quick way that you can get a little bit of information to move forward and then while in parallel focus on that long-term goal?
Cool. Anybody else want to jump in? Umberto, Dominique?
Well, I think it also comes down to, remembering kind of the fundamentals of design practice, right? Of being rooted in, user-centeredness and asking those questions. So just like Valerie said, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? Also asking, is this the right problem? What information do we have? What don't we know? And what are our biases? Like, what are the things that we know that we hold close to that may actually be preventing us from developing or creating the right solution to the problem that we're trying to solve for? And that requires asking those questions. And so you may not actually need to spend a good chunk of time, like weeks in discovery or weeks in doing research, but at least you need to kind of make sure that you have an understanding of your confidence level with like, we're confident that we're going in the right direction, that we know what we have, but also be mindful that research doesn't just happen at the beginning. It should be happening at all phases of the design process, and you should be validating and incorporating what you know and what you're learning across the entire way of working.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Umberto, you got any thoughts on this before we wrap up and go to the next question? Or?
All great insights. The only thing I would add is to start together. Like that usually helps a lot. If you loop in, if there is product management and engineering, like if you just come together to discuss that problem statement, a lot of questions will most likely arise, and everybody will start to be on board with the fact that we need to actually learn something before committing to any direction that has been discussed. So that creates like, the shared buy-in that everybody would like to understand more before, committing.
Cool. All right.
Sorry, Chris,
go for it.
I think like one of the like really important parts of discovery is also like whether we can dig into data and figure out like if this is actually really worth resolving or digging into it. And I think it's important to understand that discovery should result in some kind of outcomes, not features, and not like technical solutions. So that's maybe important to remember.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, well, I am going to actually grab a question from the chat here. I saw that Oscar asked, how do you introduce design process, or how did you introduce design processes? Dominique, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Well, I think it's one of those things that it depends on the culture, right? And we're all work with smart people, and smart people don't like to be told what to do. And so it's about co-creation. It's about testing and experimenting, and then applying the design process to how you develop ways of working. And so figuring out what works for different teams while also maintaining some sort of consistency. I like to think about process as not necessarily like boxes to check off. Like it's not about do this and this and this. It is more like akin to learning how to play an instrument. And so you first start to learn the music and the theory, and you stick pretty closely to the guardrails, to the chords. And then once you get more comfortable with that framework, with that way of working, with that instrument, you can start to, add some flair and some riffs and improvise. But once you get pretty sound, you don't actually stick that close to step by step process. You start to, get together with other people who are also sound in their craft and the way of working, and you can create jazz. And so we're all trying to get to playing jazz, and we can't get from 0 to 100. We kind of have to work on that together and figure out what works for that team and get a vibe for it. So we have to remember, as leaders and then also as practitioners, that most of the time when introducing processes and new ways of working, it's actually a cultural change that you're trying to do and trying to make happen. And that is not just as easy as saying, hey, do this, because you're trying to change mindset. You're trying to change, how people approach problems. So you have to attack it from all angles.
I love the jazz analogy. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for your answer. And Oscar, thanks for that great question. I want to remind everybody, if you want to throw questions in the YouTube chat, I'm keeping my eye on it. So if I see great questions pop up and they're relevant to what we're talking about, I'll try to weave them in. So yeah, thank you again. Does anybody else have any thoughts or anything else to add to that, of how to introduce design processes?
Sure. I love what Dominique shared. I think that's excellent. I also think about partnerships and relationships in terms of any type of discussion around process. And part of that is it's my responsibility as a practitioner to inform my counterparts, my teammates, of what I need. What do I need from them? And I hope that they're able to communicate to me what it is that they need from me. And that's kind of how you evolve into a working process, is having transparency and clear communication about and sharing about what it is that you all need to be successful, and giving what somebody else needs and taking what somebody else is giving. And then you kind of just evolve it over time.
Cool. Wonderful, wonderful. Vladimir, go ahead, man.
Yeah, I would like to maybe to kind of like continue with the jazz, because I really like the jazz and the jamming and Figma jam and the community jamming. It kind of like amplifies like what we as designers should do. Like we should gather and actually, jam together. But like when you think about the jamming and, the jazz, like what's it all about? It's about the empathy. When you work with other people, you listen to them. So process is here because it guides you, but you can jump through that process, and it comes like from working within the field. When you feel like, you could, step over or just jump through some parts of the process. This is where kind of like that experience comes in. Then it's the uncertainty of what we do, because there's no a really clear goal. We cannot know. We know from the market or our competitors how it's done, like how they do, but we don't know why it's working for them and why should we do it. So it's kind of embracing that uncertainty that jazz has in its core. So, the collaboration, listening, empathy, and just like going with the flow, relying on your team members to do the best work. And it's again at the end, kind of following patterns of design. This is like something that we usually do in the process. So these are like things that we know they're working, so we use them. We don't like always think from scratch. We try to do those things, like repeat them, so the customers or users are kind of used to some solutions, so it's kind of easier to adapt to what we are trying to do. So I just wanted to kind of connect to the idea of jazzing, because I really like it, and it's kind of really connected to how design is made and how design actually collaborates in a product environment. Like we are not alone there.
Nice. Any other thoughts on this, or we'll move on to the next question? Umberto, go for it.
Yeah, to say that human-centered design starts with the people. And most businesses want, to see that they create value for the customer. Their business grows when they create value for customers. So it should not be too difficult to create a connection between those two things. And rather than laying out, depending on the maturity of the company, rather than laying out a whole fully fleshed out process that is like, a lot of process, like a little bit like Dominique was saying, like, it's a collection of experiments. Not the advice will be not to lose sight of that we are all working in service of the customer, and design can bring, and research and so on can bring a lot to that dimension. And then you can present, hey, we just need to do something that is really valuable. It's just about, these are aspects of the business or technology or whatever. So let's try this, right? Come with me. Let's have this workshop. Let's have this other thing, whatever it is, and little steps. And then as things pay dividends, right? Results come. You can layer in more.
Okay, great. I think we'll run through this question real quickly because we're running out of time for this topic, but there were some great questions that we had. Valerie, sometimes designers will design something that can't be built by devs. How do we prevent that from happening?
Yes, this comes up a lot. So I would say involve your developers as early as possible. Design shouldn't be done in a silo. It is a team effort. Jared Spool is often talking about how everyone is a designer. I agree to that sentiment. So everyone should be participating in whatever solution that we're going to be coming up with. And it could be, sometimes what happens is the initial response is, no, we can't do that. Usually it's, no, we can't do that in this time frame. And so work with your development partners on early solutions, consider how you can break them down into smaller pieces so that you can ultimately get to maybe that future vision. But the number one advice there would be share early and often and work collaboratively.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think we got to move on from that topic. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I do see some of the great questions in there. I don't think I don't think we have time for that in this one, but I think I'll try to weave it into another topic. So thanks for the questions, guys. Okay, so let's move on to strong culture and operations. This is Dominique's topic, so go for it. Oh, I don't think you have a presentation, so yeah, just take it away.
Thank you. So as I mentioned, I lead design operations at Atlassian, and design operations as a function is about amplifying the value and the and supporting people, practices, and systems. Another way of saying it is that design operations is everything that supports high quality design craft, methods, and processes. And so kind of, this is a great segue or shift from what we were just talking about. And one of the things that Umberto mentioned is the structure of teams. So the centralized, the federated, the hybrid model, and that all changes and should really be aligned with the maturity of the org. And is usually reflected in that way. And similarly, the operational needs are usually reflective of what type of org you're structured in and what the maturity of it is. And so it changes over time. But broadly, you're thinking about how design teams work together. So how designers and design teams work together, how you actually get the work done, and then how the work that is delivered ends up impacting either the customer, the broader company, even cross-functional teams as a whole. So it's all about the how of design. I should say that even if you don't have a design operations team within your org, design operations is happening no matter what. And it's usually being done by design managers, by designers, by adjacent people collaboratively. And again, those needs and who does it and why and the fidelity and how it's centralized is dependent on the needs and the pain points. And one of the things that you discover is that, especially with a larger org, you have these teams that are trying to ship. And what that reduces is cross-team collaboration, being tied into what other teams and what other designers are learning, what other product teams are learning. And that then creates inefficiencies and creates a lot of rework, and you're not optimizing and learning from others. And so in a lot of respects, that means we're not applying the design process to our design process itself, because we're just building everything from scratch. And so when you think about the impact that having either a centralized design operations function or thinking about design operations as a holistically across the org, then you start to get into how can we make sure that we are enabling teams to work efficiently. So being able to get things done fast, because as many of us know who work with product and engineering teams, especially on the product development or the software development side, it's rapid movement. Agile is about getting things out quickly, not always about getting things done correctly or the right way. And so that, in a lot of times, is in direct conflict with our instincts as designers and how the design process works. You want to solve the right problem, the right person, and provide the right solution, which is not always that tension. And so how do you then introduce those ways of working and learn from what other teams are doing while also moving quickly? So that's the efficiency. Also, you want to enable teams to work effectively, which is about working better, working smarter. And so you can implement consistent templates, so you can make things happen faster and also build consistency. So if you think about a design system, for example, it's all about building consistent experiences, and also reducing the amount of time that designers spend building components. It's like, oh, this is a component that everyone uses, everyone's creating it from scratch, that's a waste of time. We have now a component that everyone can just go boop, and that saves amount of time. You're building efficiency, you're allowing people space to now build on top of that. And so when you think about operationalizing an org, that's one component. The other thing is thinking about the process of it, the actually how of design. How do your teams do crit? How do your teams provide feedback? How do you make design decisions and document those and make those trade-offs? And then how do you make sure that you are correcting for the problems that we are creating? Because tomorrow's bugs, tomorrow's experience issues are being created right now. So how do you reduce that in how your teams are working? And then the other part is around how designers and how design teams move through an org. So that's around career ladders, how they grow and develop as individuals and professionally, how teams and projects get formed, so you can ensure that you have the right designer with the right skills on the right projects. And so design operations, in a certain sense, going back to what Umberto was saying about how some design teams are set up as service teams, right? Design operations is actually a service design function. You're thinking about both the front of house and the back of house. So how do people actually move through the experience and grow and develop as designers? And also, how does that come out in the work? And what are the gears that put that in motion? And so you have to kind of think about how you onboard designers, how you hire them, how do you ensure that they're being placed on the right team? How do you ensure that they're growing and developing? And so all of these are pieces to the puzzle that, as I mentioned before, usually get distributed across the team, and then building consistencies, especially as teams get bigger and you scale and you move remotely and you're not in one space. I'm sure all of us have experienced many operational pain points and gaps and had to solve for over the last year. And so I encourage all of us to think about design operations from the beginning, just like you want to think about the customer from the beginning and do research. Apply that same thinking to operational. When you're thinking about operations and building teams, is how do you make sure that if you build it, you can also sustain it?
Great points, great points. Thank you very much, Dominique. I appreciate you sharing that. Okay, does anybody have anything they want to say in reaction to that? We've got some great questions in the chat. I'm going to try to get to those in a second, but we'll start off just by opening the floor. Any other comments about any of that?
I will maybe just add one thing. That's what everything Dominique said, that kind of aligns, but at the end, we are never talking about the quality of work and how we define it. And that's also a part of design ops, how do we identify what means the level of work that we need to kind of deliver, where's the impact? So these are the questions to kind of we should ask ourselves when we're building a process. What is a good process? What's the good? What does it mean actually? And how do we get from good to great? So I just wanted to add maybe this on top of everything.
Cool. All right. Well, I was actually going to go to you, Vladimir, after this. How do teams share metrics in a way that the whole team can feel accountable for success?
Well, metrics are I would say a really, really tough question, and really important one for the team. It depends on which metrics are you kind of referring to. There are product metrics that we need to achieve. Are they related to the business metrics and overall metrics that we are trying to achieve, or this is user metrics which are connected to the experience? And actually, as from the team impact, there's team metrics that we can share. So these are the outcomes of our work. So these are all a valuable question to ask yourself. And it's important for me, like we mentioned that a couple of times, like the collaboration, because it's not just on design, it's kind of like really a collaborative effort with the data teams in our companies. It's collaborative effort with like how do we track the impact of our research, and how do we track the progress of our product from design perspective. We need to do it like cross collaboratively across team. So those metrics are kind of like clear, understandable. We all in the company know, like, how do we identify or how do we define those metrics, and then we can share it across a company. So there are different ways, like, there's many dashboards or internal data tools. We do a lot of like sharing of what we do through, some reports, through some like presentations, alignment with the stakeholders. So there are many ways. I believe like the more we share and like the more we know where's the source of the truth, the better the use of those metrics that we share. We shouldn't track those metrics just because of the metrics. So
right. Cool.
I just wanted to add on to what Vladimir was saying. I spent a good chunk of my career as an analyst in the context of design, and it's really difficult. Like, teams struggle, right? How do we track things? What is the right metric, right? And I think there are a couple of things. It's one, you need to tie it to the business, just like Vladimir said. I think that there's that higher level business impact metrics, but then also when you're thinking about this specific project and this problem that you're trying to solve, it's really important to identify UX outcomes for what you're designing, and take it from, what does success look like? If this is the solution that I'm designing for, what is the UX outcome that we're hoping for? Okay, what's preventing us to get it to from doing this right now? And then that actually identifies what are the kind of early indicators that you can have that help you identify whether or not you are going to achieve that actual outcome, and whether or not it's ultimately going to deliver value. And so that's looking at it that way and kind of breaking it up from project to project is good for individual solutions, but also to the point of like taking it higher level of like connecting the dots from the design work to the business. It ultimately helps you make other decisions and see how design impacts more broadly.
Awesome, thanks so much. Anybody else want to jump in, or do we want to move on to our next question?
I'll add.
Go for it.
Thinking about the broader context, so not specific to metrics of an individual project, I hope that everyone here understands that there isn't a universal design metric. There isn't this one thing that's going to fit everybody at every company. And so we have to be really deliberate about what it is that you're hoping to achieve and how you're going to achieve it. And then as the maturity of your organization grows, you're going to run into things like OKRs, objectives and key results. And you're going to want to share those across the different departments. So with product, with your engineering partners, because you're going to want to share those, because it's really hard for design or UX to own the end-to-end to anything, because we are reliant on our partners to deliver. And so it's just really important that, if your organization is struggling with what is our metric, everybody's been there. It will continue to be a challenge. Don't worry about it. Try one out, see how it fits. Kind of my learnings, I just went through this process at GitLab, is try not to focus so much on productivity, because design and productivity is really hard to measure. It's not a one-to-one to say how engineering can run their metrics. So just know it's difficult. You're going to have to refine it over time. And the best thing that you could do is make sure you're connecting it to what you're doing within the design organization with product and engineering.
Cool. Thank you so much.
If I may add just one more thing.
Yeah, go for it.
So, you know, metrics are really, really challenging topic, I believe, for every team. And it's like what Valerie said, like there's no one way to do it in one organization and then copy paste it in the other. So when we think about the metrics, I would say we need, like, from design perspective, think about them as signals. Signals whether like what we do kind of like moves us forward and try to kind of iterate. And that's the key. So if it doesn't work, like we need to track it across time just to be able to compare it, and then like we can like figure out maybe this needs some kind of like, you know, iteration, or we need to think about them differently. But there are like, you know, signals of what we do. So I would say this is like something to think about when we try to figure those metrics for specific product, team, OKRs, company. It's just like, you know, there are many ways to do it.
As for the mutual accountability, right, on delivering success, a lot can be done again with the team starting together and breaking down that problem. Like, you know, usually there are business objectives, there are metrics being established, and the whole team needs to feel like, if you think about a cross-functional team, needs to feel accountable for that. Which means breaking that down into aspects where the different function, the different people, the different individuals on the team are solely accountable. But like, it's almost like the sum of those things will deliver the results that they are for which they are mutually accountable. So like if someone fails, the team fails, and so you need to create that sense of dependency. Because it's a team at the end of the day. So if somebody on that boat is not doing their part, you're not gonna win, right? That race. So yeah.
Awesome, thanks. Well, we're gonna have to move on from this topic, but I just saw one great question from Peter to Dominique that we want to throw in here real quick. Dominique, Peter wants to know, how do you control the business and financial aspects of a design team or even a design ops team?
So it depends. It works. It's different for different orgs. Many times, design operations, or usually a head of design ops, partners with senior leadership to define like the financial year for the org, and so that's usually around the things that the kind of like the travel budgets, the contractor budgets, and then managing that for the year. For other teams, that's managed by, let's say, a chief of staff, if there is one. So right now, our individual heads of design, so we have several, manage their specific team, and then our the overall budget for our design org actually sits with our CX ops chief of staff. And so she works with our CXO and our heads of design to identify like headcount budget. And then at a more lower level, they work with their managers. So it's kind of what I was saying before around how design operations, if you don't have the team, it gets distributed. And if you have a smaller team, there are some things that still get handled. But there are certain pieces, and for my specific team, like sponsorship budgets, contractors, education budgets that do sit with design ops rather than with heads of design, because it's across the org.
Awesome, thanks so much. Okay, so now let's move on to strong connections. The topic of strong connections. Vladimir, this is you. Take it away.
Thanks. So we mentioned actually a lot of things that kind of lead to those strong connections. You know, when we think about like what we need to set from the team or company level, we think in those like short-term and long-term goals that we want to achieve. So it's kind of like strategy, what we want to do. So in the beginning, like, you know, we set those like tactics, and it's like really short-term invest in. Then we move forward, we think about the strategy and the vision that kind of like goes through several years of like what company is doing or wants to achieve. Then there's like a mission statement that kind of drives us forward. But on top of everything, you have those values. And those values are actually like the building foundations of a team and strong connections. What the company values and what company kind of perceives by kind of defining the authenticity of the org. This is what it comes down to. So the values are something where we need to know what we stand for and what we are trying to achieve together. So from design team perspective, like, you know, we usually tend to have those like values around the empathy, you know, humility. We want to be like caring for each other. We also think about the inclusivity of our org and like how our work is inclusive to the outside. And also like we trying to be supportive. You know, it's like it should be in our core, and we should be kind of approachable. So these are like the core, but you know, every team defines them based on like what are the core values of the company, and then you kind of dig into specifics of each teams. And when those teams like kind of align on about the business and you know, customer goals that we want to achieve, there's a big space around it that kind of like, you know, opens a lot of things to discuss. And this space is kind of always filled from our perspective, design perspective, with our methods, with our processes, with what we know, with our kind of design thinking. And usually it leads to actually thinking that, you know, sometimes design is like the most important thing, and it's not. So it's about like those relationships that we talk about, the teamwork. So it's about like communication, really strong or important part of those building like connections within the team, because like everything falls apart when you think about the communication. Like the biggest issues you can have in the team or in the company is kind of related to either bad or miscommunicated things. And also it comes down to some kind of like transparency that you want to achieve. So sharing what we all do, being accountable for the work you do, and share it with everybody else, so they know kind of like what it leads to. So, you know, high level design kind of leadership or design organization, it sets like the strategy. So it sets the process and some kind of like quality for the team. Then we talk about the craft. We talk about like, you know, how we want to form our teams. Then we start thinking like how we're going to coach those newcomers or how we're going to elevate those people in the team. We try to define those team objectives. We try to kind of like prioritize work, define what's important, what's not, how to dig into discovery, how to actually identify what's important. Then we think about like what's the strategic like context of everything we do with the governance. At the end, everything needs to lead to some kind of impact. So to kind of like build actually a product, we need to build a team that works together. And that's like a biggest identifier. So in the core of all that I mentioned so far, to be able to build that team that works together, we need to give that team some kind of autonomy to make those decisions, to kind of work together. They need to be accountable for that work, and they need to have the opportunity to identify like what's the next step. And that's, you know, in the core of everything kind of leads to trust. So trust is like, I would say, the biggest and most important thing that we need to think about when we think about good communication or we good about those connections. So, you know, it comes down to kind of like having a safe environment for a team to work. That safe environment sometimes like builds the friendships that go beyond just co-worker friendships. And this is all about the relationships that you build in the team. So the communication and relationships open a position. So where you at that point, you have the team bonding and sense of belonging that kind of like create that positive environment. So you have the trust, you know, people trust where they work, who they work with. they have the pride of what they do, and they at the end they kind of like jam together or do the jazz. So they kind of like it comes down to playing together, if I may use Dominique jazz reference. So that's kind of like my short intro about connections and how to build them.
Thank you, man. I actually have a question of mine actually builds on that. You came on to Kiwi remotely, and I came on to Wrike remotely. I actually started the day all the COVID restrictions kicked off. So when you're having to build relationships remotely and build positive culture remotely, like, do you have any tips for people on how to do that? When you're just looking at each other on screens?
I would say it was a challenge. Like from my perspective, when everything like the COVID started, I actually planned to move to Czech Republic to kick off everything, but it didn't work out because the week that I needed to join, actually everything stopped, everything closed. So it was a challenge for me. I kind of like I was having like some concerns regarding like, am I going to be able to kind of like actually, really understand or meet those people in a way that I would do maybe in person. But then like, when everybody was so open, actually the best advice I could give is actually to, try to be yourself on those calls, like try to be transparent. And, there's also things to share that go beyond everyday work. So there's need to be some kind of like, time for doing that, to build the relationship or to build the friendship or to start actually any kind of like connecting to other human being. It's, being open and trying to kind of like really understand and listen to what they need to say to you and to understand what they're saying. That I would say that this is in the core. Listening is kind of in the core of remote work, how we can, build this relationship, and how we can start trusting each other. It's a lot of one-on-one calls and trying to dig into, the emotions, and that's hard. And these machines are not like really perfect for doing that. We are super efficient remote, but we kind of tend to get lost a bit with being effective, and being performance-wise. So,
yeah, great answer. Yeah, thanks so much. Does anybody else have any thoughts on this? How your guys' experience with these kinds of situations? Dominique, go for it. I saw you on mute. Go for it. Yeah.
So I think that this is something that we've all been struggling with at different levels of fidelity. Even for those teams that were already remote first, it's working from home is different because it's not really working from home. It's being at home doing work during a global pandemic, which has completely different, is a completely different experience. But there are a few things that you have to think about. Is one, absolutely new joiners. How do you onboard them into a team? It's already difficult going to a new company and trying to learn all the things about the culture, about your job, about, how to use a thing. But it's also, it happens with teams that are coming together for the first time, like new teams that are being formed in reorgs, right? You kind of have to take a moment to reset and say, okay, who are these people that I need to work with? How does this person work best? How do we work and collaborate as a team? Because if those aren't aligned, then it's going to cause a lot of friction, and it's going to cause a lot of miscommunication and tumult where you can kind of get ahead of it. And then, so I definitely recommend kind of doing a pause and saying, how is working from home and working remotely or cross geo impacting my real life, and what do I need from my team to know so I can work effectively? Also kind of assessing your rituals, assessing your meetings, and figure out what can we cut and where can we optimize the time. Also building into your team, how your team works is like doing a regular like health monitor or checking in with the team to see what's the health of our team? Where are there opportunities for improvement? My team, we started doing a 2020 in 20. So a hindsight 2020 in 20 minutes, once a month, just kind of like what worked, what didn't work, what are some ideas that we could, find for solutions to or optimize for, and how can we push that forward? And then lastly, about collaboration, collaborating async is, what people have really gravitated towards. They've either gone all the way async or like everything's in a meeting. And my hunch is that most of the things that we do should probably be in a happy medium, a mix of both. And so figuring out how your team needs to, what's the best mode of collaboration for your team and for the thing that you're trying to do, because it's not always the best use of time to do everything synchronously when you just need to kind of get feedback on a thing, or to do things async when you actually need that shared understanding. And so I worked with one of our team coaches to kind of put together a remote collaboration framework that offered guidance for what level of fidelity or what are the pieces that you need to the puzzle to be successful in this type of collaboration, and so on and so forth, in the context of Atlassian teams. And so figuring out what that means for your individual, either design team or cross-functional team or leadership team, can really help get everyone on the same page.
Awesome, great.
Anybody else? Maybe
Umberto, Valerie? Vlad, go ahead.
I just want to kind of like follow up, because those rituals are like in the core of making remote work. So couple of maybe ideas of what we did, those ritual coffee breaks. These are something that work pretty awesome. So team members can meet across or company wide. Maybe you don't know even that person, but kind of Slack do that for you. So it kind of proposes a pair that should meet on a weekly basis. Maybe using some icebreakers. So you actually find out some details about that person that you wouldn't either know in some meetings. Quizzes, games nights, we did it all. So these are all possible things that you can do. Movie nights, really fun ways to kind of do some things together besides doing the work. So I would say that fun factor is actually what maybe for me it's something that we in the remote environment miss the most.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that one for just a little bit. We our great team in our Prague office set up a coffee bot on Slack where it asks everyone every week, hey, do you want to take part this week? And if people say yes, then it just pairs them up with a random person. You sit down on Zoom for 30 minutes or something like that and have a nice little chat or something. And you're right, it does definitely help. But okay, cool. So anybody else want to weigh in on this? Anybody else want to jump in?
I'll say that working at GitLab has been just a huge, wonderful time for me. And we've been remote since our origin. So I feel like we didn't experience the big shift because of the pandemic, but that doesn't mean that we didn't feel it, because we definitely did. And it is I just want to, our panelists have been highlighting these things, and I want to reinforce it, that when you're doing your work and you're living in the same place, it is very different than being a nomad and being able to travel to different areas and working from different environments. Because when you're home, and everything that's going on in your life is there. And it's stressful, and you see it within yourself, you see it on members of your team. And it's just really important, especially if you're a leader, make sure that you're asking how your people are doing, and try not to word it in a yes, no type of question, because that doesn't really get you anywhere. People will say, are you doing okay? Yes. Well, that's not a real answer, right? You want to try to get a little bit behind that and make sure that you're offering them ways that they can try to cope. We have a family and friends day at GitLab that we have once a month due to the pandemic, and it is specifically to address the potential burnout, because what we actually saw was an increase in productivity overall throughout the entire company as soon as the pandemic hit. And so we understood that there was a change that occurred, and it was impacting how people were working. And so it's really important for leaders to be aware that that is there, even if your company had already been working remotely.
Cool. All right, Umberto, you want to weigh in on this one before we move on?
I think we touched on this one.
Cool, sounds good. Okay, next up from Marcelo, there was a question in the chat that said, how do you share and implement ways of working and best practices without being limiting or patronizing, but still making sure there are standards? Umberto, I'll ask you to take this one.
Yeah, so let me think 1 second about this one.
We've got the question up on the screen if you want to read it again.
The fact that you are creating a standard doesn't mean that you're not allowing for experiments, right? Actually, the standard defines where the practice is, and what is the process or the bar that you need to hit in terms of driving a result home. Usually has been established because of successes from the past, right? Like we know that if we follow a certain process, or if we do things according to this model, we achieve results of this time. But doesn't mean that it has to be limiting all the time, it has to be restricting people. So if people say hey, I would like to try something new, I think I can actually do even better by applying this. I read something, or I heard other people doing this, I would like to try that. Absolutely. That, otherwise you stop, you put the ceiling, right? And that's going to be the level of quality that you achieve, and you cannot go beyond that. So I think actually it's good as leaders to establish that guidance. With some standards, you also give a little bit of direction and uncertainty for people that don't know how to approach something. Maybe they're doing it for the first time. So I think it's very useful to do that. It doesn't mean there has to be a rigid law and that must be followed all the time in a rigorous way. Of course, you should not deviate to do something worse. You should deviate with a hypothesis of doing better. But as long as that's the intent, I think giving some level of freedom is a good thing. I hope I answered the question.
Cool, yeah. Anybody else have anything else they want to weigh in on?
Yeah, one thing, like design critiques, I would say this is something that actually you have, if you have the design system, you have the processes, and these are the basics, but the collaboration happens in design critiques. So this is where you can kind of play with the standards, because the team kind of does it on their own. So for me, the design critiques is something that's kind of in the core of everything we talk about today. And it keeps the quality of the solution on the level, because you get the chance to collaborate with your team members, hear the thoughts, get the feedback, and then use it to make your designs better, different. So maybe one of the things that you can do if you have the team. If you don't have the team, then I would say that's a different challenge to handle.
Also, I think that, again, it goes back to culture, and it goes back to communication, and thinking about implementing ways of working and best practices or standards as a change management thing, right? So it's about how it's communicated. It's about how it's rolled out. There are a lot of great change management frameworks that think about, like ADKAR, for example, that are around, adoption and how you communicate and how you educate people and the shifts that you're trying to make. There's also kind of like that shift in perspective, and a lot of that happens either over time or in how you're communicating. But if you think about, for example, design systems, which is all about standards, right? That shift in many orgs, design system teams or design system leadership is often perceived to be kind of like the design system police, right? And they're like, oh, this is not the component, this is not the standard, you need to, and so there needs to be a shift in perspective from thinking about design system or any other mechanism, QA or whatever, as the ceiling, and more think about it as the floor. So something that you build off of, similar to a platform. And so then it doesn't become limiting, it becomes kind of like that foundation and that undercurrent, much like a process or a way of working. And getting familiar. We talked about jazz, right? They're not jazz musicians aren't throwing music theory out of the window. They're still playing the same, I can't remember how many notes, but it's just around the application. And so design principles are exactly the same. It's not interpreting word for word. It's about how you apply and how you interpret it for the problem. And so shifting that, just flipping it on the head from the ceiling to the floor. The sky's the limit once you're on the floor.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, I would say like maybe the design system should be enablers of creativity in the team. Like this is where you should extend it. So it's not about like defining the roof that you need to hit. It's just like enablers to go beyond.
Great. Valerie, you want to weigh in or go for it? Go ahead.
Yeah, just to add, I like to take everything as a design problem. And to me, that question I would ask, well, it sounds like that design lead is identifying an inefficiency, or there's some kind of area of the current process that is not working in the way that they think or they think that it could be better, right? And so I would take it back to the root of that, of where in the process specifically are you wanting to make the improvement? Why? Who all is involved? And then take it from there. So it's exactly like going through a normal design process. As a designer, I would use that same application for a process.
Awesome. All right, thank you very much. I do want to get to one more question in this category before we move on. So this is a great one. How might we build camaraderie in the design department when designers are members of and associate themselves with their cross-functional Scrum teams, not with the design team itself? I realized I didn't specify a person. Vladimir, why don't you go ahead for this one?
Well, that's it depends what you want to achieve. Like I think like there's nothing wrong with designers being a part of like Scrum teams and having their actually a collaborational level that frames that frames like the process and builds the connection within the team, because that's what you want. Of course, we need to build it also around designs, because design as a function amplifies those designers to kind of grow. But within the agile teams, they also need to kind of grow, but in a different direction. By growing, I think like in making the solution or product or feature what they work on, making it better. And I believe like building it both ways, it should work. Like we should build it within those cross-functional things and like within design. Sometimes it's about like how or where designers sit. Sometimes those connections are built that way. People are just like that. If you sit close to your Scrum team, then it's kind of like you build there a connection. If you are disconnected from design team as a whole, then like you are not maybe doing something that builds the camaraderie within that team. So I would say, you should firstly identify, as Valerie said, like we can take everything we do as a design problem. So we identify why is this happening, user kind of like methods, and then propose a solution. Right now, it's kind of hard to say why it's happening. I couldn't say there are different ways to handle this kind of disconnection within the team. So I would say, do the discovery and then figure out what could be the next steps and how to repair it.
Cool. Go ahead.
I would love to offer some kind of tactical things that you can do. And when you have kind of this model, it's really easy for designers to feel isolated when they're on those teams, because you're not surrounded by, often you're outnumbered by engineers, for example. And so you don't really have anyone to bounce ideas off of, especially if you're on a smaller team and you're one-on-one. And so a good way to mitigate that is to pair designers. Which is how many design teams, Slack does it. We do it on some of our teams to kind of make sure that you have someone to, look at your work and again, bounce ideas off of, and also augment your gaps and vice versa. Another thing that we do is, and this is also to mitigate the silos that exist within products, because we have a bunch of different products and product teams. And often kind of what I was saying before, you're not leveraging what other teams are learning, even though, you probably should be. And so we do cross-org and cross-team sparring or critique sessions, where we're actually having rotating groups of designers from different functions and different functions, as in content design, service design, product design, and also different product teams to crit work. And so then it takes it more to the craft, and you don't have to have subject matter expertise or technical knowledge in the product itself. And it's really about, the craft of design, how you decided to solve this problem. And you're also building connections across the org. And those are just some of the tactical design craft things that we've done, as well as kind of more building design community. So highlighting different leaders and different ICs from across the org. We kind of did a version of Inside the Actor Studio called Inside Design, where different leaders are interviewing different ICs and senior leaders from across the org to highlight and bring, what do you think of design? How did you come to it? And it makes it a little bit more personable. So it's not just, oh, that person over there who I hear about but don't know anything about.
Cool, thanks. All right, Umberto, Valerie, you guys got anything you want to contribute? Go for it.
Maybe just adding that, it's a little bit like I was saying earlier, is you want to create this cross-functional partnership, and then you want to have functional excellence. So the cross-functional environment is really the performance zone, mainly, not exclusively, but mainly. And the functional part is more the reflection zone. Again, not exclusively, but mainly. What I mean is that, a lot of the growth happens by doing, but also because people reflect on what they've done, and they also learn from others, get inspired, basically what Dominique was saying. So if people see value into that, they will actually invest into those relationships. So it's about creating that space and making it valuable, and making it fun, right? Where you can also create a little bit of trust, share personal aspects of, as long as people are comfortable, but progressively, really to create that team where people can learn from each other, and that can become a really powerful environment, right? When you have this hybrid model in that way.
Yeah, and there's an added benefit to all of it too. You get visibility into other areas of the product or the other areas of the company. You start learning that material, which could contribute to your own. You become smarter in the decisions that you're making within your own area of the product, or maybe 3-6 months from now you transition to another team and you already have this foundational understanding of what has been going on because you've been working with a designer that has been over there and you're familiar with their work.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Okay, cool. So let's move on to our next topic, strong career growth. So back to you, Valerie.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And when I think about career growth and development, kind of the thing that comes to mind is how little so many people do it. And you have to be really deliberate about it. And a lot of it is on leadership. So as leaders, we have to be really good and mindful of reminding people the importance of it. We need to give people space to do it, because one of the things that I hear quite often from practitioners is, I'm so busy doing my own work. I've got this due date that I have to hit. We're about to do this release. I don't have time for this. So it's really important for leaders to express how important it is. Another thing that's really important is make sure you're thinking beyond your current role, even your current company. Your career growth and development is not isolated or exclusive to where you are today. It is the steps of how you're going to get to where you want to go. And a lot of people are sometimes taken aback by that when, as a leader, I approach them and I say, well, beyond GitLab, for example, what do you want to do? Where do you want to grow? Where do you see yourself? Hopefully that continues with GitLab, but if it doesn't, as a leader, our job is to make sure that you are learning the things that you want to learn and you need to learn so that you can be successful even beyond working at GitLab. And then probably the third thing that I would highlight here is, if you are a leader, if you are a manager, don't forget to take care of you. It's really easy to kind of formulate your own career development around your current team, because so much of our energy is in supporting them and making sure that they are being successful. So I often have to press managers on my team to make sure that they're thinking about what it is that they want and making sure that I'm giving them the time and the space so that they can actually achieve that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. All right. Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
One good friend of mine, Tim Kadich, he actually talked about the career as you are building a company or you're building a product. So defining your goals and figuring out where you want to be, short term, long term, and then just identify those steps you need to take to get there. So what learnings you need to have, and what I learned in my career is the design field, it's kind of continually changing. So we need to have that changing mindset all the time and learn those things all the time. So for me, going through career as a designer, it's really I cannot imagine it that you actually what you start in your first year or as a junior will actually continue. It's gonna pivot, and you need to have that mindset that's open and kind of rebuild yourself all over again. If there's a need, tools come and go, everything changes, and the knowledge you need to get from A to B to C, it also changes. So I would say invest in yourself, and companies also from if I talk about from the business perspective, I always believe in trying to invest and grow those people within the company. That's really important. So find an environment that does that.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you.
I think that it's really interesting to see how, at least from my observation, how things have changed over the course of my career, both from what I value and then also what I see others valuing. And right now, I think many, especially very junior designers, are chasing the promotion, right? And they very much equate growth with being promoted, instead of the honing and developing of skills not even just kind of like the acquiring of skills, but developing how you apply those skills, because that's really the indicator of progression and levels when you as you go across your career. It's not a lot of times that you've gained more skills, though again, the more early in your career, you're gaining more and more skills, but it's actually how you apply them and how you solve problems differently. And that is a lot of times really difficult, especially for junior designers to grasp and make tangible, because it's not something that you can just check the box on. And so figuring out a way to structure either growth profiles or your ladders to reinforce the need for a growth mindset and to cultivate that, and thinking about how can I gain both knowledge and applied skills and grow in the way that I frame and think about my approach, as opposed to how do I, achieve the next goal? How do I hit that next bell? Because then what you get is people who are 10 years into their career and they really lack the fundamentals, and they can't actually grow beyond that because their ability to approach and solve different problems hasn't really grown in their years of experience. And so that's something that I think is really at the core of how you progress over the course of your career. And also, it doesn't stop, to Valerie's point, it does not stop when you become a manager. You just need to pivot. And I think that managers and leadership often put their growth and development on the back burner, and it becomes about how many people can I manage, or can I manage managers, as opposed to being able to actually build the craft of managing and mentoring, which is what it is. And so again, it's applying that growth mindset, and it's figuring out how to, again, envision, if we're thinking about, the visioning work that many designers do, how do you envision your future? And it's not about the title that you hit in 10 years or 15 years or whatever. It's about the applied skills and the problems you're trying to solve for.
Absolutely.
Yeah, many thoughts have been already expressed on this, but very important to think about both the personal dimension and the business dimension when thinking about like a development plan or a growth path, because if whatever growth path resonates with the individual, right, like comes with what they want to do, they will have the motivation to do it. It's a lot of work. They will have to probably find the time, right, and prioritize against the many other things. So it's important that they are self-motivated about this. It's not just a ticking box exercise. And the business dimension is important because it gives the opportunity to exercise those things. So like if you think about that up front, then it becomes easier. So and as Valerie said earlier, like it doesn't have to be limited to like the normal progression, like the next level in the same career path, becoming more senior or something. There could be a change of career, right? Like from an individual contributor to a manager to an architect or whatever. It could be a change of function from design to product management or whatever it is. But there could also be thinking about a transition out of the company. It's something that it's hard to say because we all want to retain the best talent, right? But at some point we also need to think about that. We all learn so much as well because we experience different environments, different challenges, and so it's normal, it's part of the life cycle. And so we probably will retain people even longer if we are putting that into account, and people keep experiencing growth within the current role until actually they're ready to do something else. And so also like thinking about like what is going to be a challenge beyond the current organization. Like for some people, it could be that they want to become founders, like build their own companies. What are the skills that one has to develop to do that? Right, that's a very interesting one. Like there are lots of things about different aspects of the business, lots of leadership and so on. So like then one has to think about what opportunities you have in the companies to exercise those skills in a way that actually you deliver value to the business, so that we can make sure that this is not just a theoretical exercise, but actually we can follow through.
Cool. Anybody else?
Maybe one tactical actually thing about like also how to help yourself. Like as designers, like we barely self-reflect. This is like something that we do not do so much. But in your career, I think like this is one of the most important parts. Like track what you're doing on a week level. What you are achieving, what you are trying to achieve, and then self-reflect after some time or in certain periods on what you have done actually. Like put yourself quarterly goals and kind of evaluate where you are. This is actually a really great exercise to grow in your role and identify those weak areas, especially in the discussion with your manager or peers. Like gather that feedback. This is important and kind of like keep the track of it. Self-reflection is like the best thing we can do as like it's not just about designers, it's everybody. Like we should more self-reflect and learn from our like mistakes, goals, and like what we are able to do. So that's maybe one thing.
Cool. Valerie, you want to weigh in on this one?
It was my topic, but yeah.
Weigh in on the discussion. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, every that came out harsh. I didn't mean that. It came out completely different than I intended. So yeah, I mean, everything that everybody's contributed is fantastic. Maybe some kind of to add on to some of the tactics. So what we do at GitLab is monthly check-ins on kind of career growth and development. I do like the highlight of, not focusing so much on title. I have seen that more recently over the past few years, where it does kind of feel like people are just, that's the next thing, right? That's the shiny object that they want to go for. So I can understand that, but it really is about the skills and about the what is going to enable you to be successful long-term, title aside. And you can do so much even within your current title. You shouldn't feel like you're limited to really anything based off of whatever your title is today. And then, yeah, I'll just end with do it monthly, give yourself time. And if you're a manager, make sure you're also thinking about yourself.
Awesome. Okie dokie. Well, let's go to a question real quick before we move on from this topic. Umberto, how can people avoid personal bias while assessing team members' skills?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing around bias is to recognize that even if you're not aware of them, you might have some, right? Like you need to hunt for them. So I guess no one would deliberately do something unfair unless they're not in a honest place. Knowing that they have a bias, but we probably all have. I mean, for sure we all have. So like we need to think about when just listen a lot, like get in connection with our emotions. That's usually a good sign for probably something going on in decision making that could be less rational or less pondered. If something makes us very excited and something makes us really frustrated, is it often coming from the same people? That probably could indicate that there is a pattern there and maybe a predisposition for something like that. So once I guess like one logs that, I don't know if officially logs it or mentally logs that, and like reflects on those things, it's easier to then say like, hey, maybe I'm not being completely fair. I'm not evaluating in the same way. Then also you can use others, right? Like it's not just about your own opinion or evaluation individually. Like build a circle of people that can help you to evaluate situations. So like triangulate, listen to different perspectives, like so that that could really help to make better decisions and remove some of those elements of subjectivity.
Cool. Who wants to weigh in?
I think that last point of removing subjectivity is really important. So yes, we all have a bias. We all carry that. The more that we are aware of it, the better we will be, the more effective we will be. Being honest and open about it is also helpful. But if we can just remove the subjectivity, it's kind of going back to what I've said earlier. I look at things from a design perspective. So what is the problem? What is my own bias contributing to this? What solutions did we come up with? And then how do we work through that? And so I just always take it back to kind of what's going on, what's the potential problem, and then how can we work on it together? And I think that's an important aspect too, is that especially if someone is saying, I think that you're looking at this from a biased perspective, we'll talk about it. Help me understand where my bias is, because I might not be aware of it, and just have an open dialogue. That creates trust as well. And then hopefully you'll be able to then offer even specifics of, so if there's a question of, what are you expecting of me for this particular element or this responsibility of my role? Can you give me an example of how I can show you that I'm fulfilling that, right? And give them multiple examples of how they can reference that, so they can see maybe there wasn't a bias that was leading to a particular decision after all. And then if they're seeing that others are meeting what your expectation was, then they can use that as an example. it becomes the exemplar. They know that other people are doing it, therefore, I'm not being necessarily treated differently. And so any time that you can reference something that's already been done, or just being very clear up front, if you have a new hire, go through those job responsibilities in the beginning, give them examples ahead of time, so that it does remove that level of subjectivity.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I would mention maybe 3 things. Like, first is actually to slow down, because making fast decisions, they could be biased, so you don't have the time to kind of check. One more thing is actually that we tend to be in similar circles in the company. So you need to extend your, I would say, social bubble to kind of go outside of that circle and figure out whether the bias is within the circle or not. And the third is actually to kind of question yourself, always, why do you think something is happening? Question what somebody is telling you. This is the most important. And maybe recently I read a really good article from one of the product managers on Amplitude, John Cutler, and he's talking about the self-serving bias in IT or the whole product area. And it's really important to think about, because we tend to act that way. We think that we know something and we try to apply it everywhere. And this is the first thing where you present what you're doing as a bias on your team, company. So it comes down to slowing down and questioning everything. So we need to question why we are acting that way. So for me, this is a big topic. there's so many different biases in the companies, and we need to kind of learn to act when we perceive the bias. I would say, like, this is the big learning we need to have, and on soft skills as well. So this is about, like, growing in your career also. How do you handle that bias? How do you perceive it? How do you recognize it? So yeah, that's it.
All right, thanks. Awesome. Anybody else want to weigh in? Okie dokie. All right. So we have one bonus track question, which I'm actually going to ask all of you. You're all going to get 3 minutes to answer this. And the question is, how do you hire great UX professionals? We'll start with Dominique.
Well, I think that it's a few things. It's around making sure that you have an organization that people want to come and work for, and you have an organization that people want to stay at, because it's not just about getting people in the door, it's about keeping them. And as many of us know, many hires come from referrals. They come from people who say, hey, come and work with me. And so in order to hire the talent, the people who other people want to work with, you need to make sure that your internal culture reflects somewhere that people actually want to work. Secondly, you need to actually have a conversation with leadership across the board and get an understanding of what you're looking for. So if you're hiring managers, if you are senior leadership and you're thinking about how your org is going to grow and develop over the next, let's say, 2 to 3 years, right? What goes back to that outcome, the outcomes and metrics when we were talking about before is like, okay, this is where we want to be in 2 to 3 years. What is preventing us from getting there? Whether it be kind of organizational or structural, cultural, or gaps in skills. Okay, what are the things that we can do to solve for that? It's not just about hiring the people with the right skills, but it's also about building those skills internally, which then, of course, goes back to what I just said before, and making sure that everyone's aligned on that. And so that kind of shift from hiring people, making hires for the org rather for the specific role that you're hiring for is also really important, especially if you have a large organization. It helps kind of like widen the field. It's like, this person may not be great for this role, but they may be good for this team. And then the thirdly is making sure that you're building up kind of equity or cachet within the design community, right? Whether that be thought leadership or building out a pipeline, getting connected. I think in the context of building out more diverse teams, whether that be gender diversity, racial, ethnic diversity, ability, which is something that many people often leave out when they're talking about diversity. If you're building products for everyone, they should be accessible. And so you should make sure you try to hire and have disabled designers, which you probably already do. They're probably invisible disabilities, but you also need blind and low vision designers and deaf and hard of hearing designers and people with low mobility. And so that builds well-rounded products, well-rounded teams to make sure that you're developing, you're creating the best experience. And that should go into your overall hiring philosophy and what you look for, and everyone should agree for that. And then lastly is think about hiring for potential and not just for what people have done. And this often is done when it comes to men. Men are often hired on potential, and women and people of color are not. And so apply that across the board. And so that's how you hire a great UX team or just a product design team for those teams that are cross-functional.
Thank you so much. Great, fantastic points. I appreciate it. Vladimir, how about you go next?
Well, Dominique put it quite well.
She did.
Yeah. So everything comes down to kind of like company, and I would say the biggest challenge is actually it's not a challenge to get people in, it's a challenge to keep them, and that comes down like what you are trying to achieve as an organization and where you are at your current stage. When you think about the companies, they are like in different stages. So if you think about like in a curve, there are companies that are just in the beginning, so it's a messy field. A lot of opportunities to learn, to kind of like grow, but the process is not set. So when you hire, especially the candidates need to understand which kind of company they are applying for. So if they perceive the product as something good, but they also need to understand where the company is in this life cycle, and this is the most important part to identify what you are applying for. And then thinking from inside, I would say defining that the strategy of the team and the persona you need to get from that where you are right now and where you want to be in 3 years. This is actually the most important. So with that, you frame the process, how it should work, what you are evaluating for, and what kind of a candidate are you bringing that will add to the culture that you have in the company. You don't want that culture filled all the time. That's the diversity that we are speaking about, and inclusion that we're trying to get, because those different ideas can build either a team or a product to the next stage. So for me, it's kind of all falling down to that. So from my perspective, I'm trying to kind of also influence the company in a way to kind of move it in that direction, so we make it a better place for everybody who will join. And also on the team level, I want to kind of make those connections work, so you grow as a person, to the next level. But for me, candidates also needs to do kind of work, or they need to understand what they are applying for, with what kind of company is it, which stage it is. So these are a couple of points.
Thanks, appreciate it. All right, next up, let's go to Valerie.
Yeah, all really good points. I would add that I'll start with hiring. So with hiring, the approach that I like to take is start with the underrepresented, whether that is a group or region of the world, because that's going to help you get different perspectives. And that is so important when you're building a team. The other thing that I will say is at GitLab, we do everything transparently, and it's a huge advantage for our hiring process, because if you are a designer or an engineer or a product manager or anybody, you can literally see all of our work. You can go into our product and you can see exactly how I'll focus on design, our designers are working. You can see their work. You can even provide feedback on their work if you want. And you just kind of get the feel of what it might be like in a day at working as a designer at GitLab. I think during the interview process, it's also really important to remember that, yes, we are interviewing candidates, but they are interviewing us as well. And it's really important as a hiring manager to make sure that we are being open and honest about what it is like working at our company, and making sure that they're going to be comfortable. I mean, if we want to talk about how do we keep people long-term, you don't want to bring somebody in who then a year later figures out this wasn't quite for me, or the shoe didn't fit. And so you want to make sure that you are accurately portraying what it is like to work. Make sure that your interview process is a panel of people, so they get different perspectives. So for our design process, they meet with a product manager, they can meet with an engineering manager. You can actually interview or speak with anybody in the company if you really wanted. You could let the recruiter know so that you can get that perspective. So sometimes I do phone calls with women in tech, And so they are interested to know, what is it really like being a woman at GitLab? And what kind of programs are in place? And I'm happy to answer those questions for them, because that is a really important thing for us to share and for them to know, and to know that it's not just something that you can read in our handbook. We actually apply it, and there are groups available and so on. And then lastly, I'll highlight well, one more interviewing thing. The hiring manager has to have a really good perspective of who they currently have on their team and what their skills and alignment are, and identify the gaps that might exist, because that's really what you want to focus on in your hiring, is how do you find somebody that's complementary. You don't want a cookie cutter. You don't want to end up hiring the same type of person or the person who has the same set of skills. You want complementary skills to balance. And so that's really important. And it's also really important to know that, yeah, you don't always have to hire senior designers. It's really beneficial, especially when you're talking about retaining talent. It is healthy, it is natural, it is wonderful to hire a junior designer or someone that is younger in their career, because you're going to give them so much growth opportunities, and they won't reach that, or it'll take them quite some time to reach that kind of ceiling that some of senior designers or staff level or principal designers can feel, that, I don't want to go into management, but I don't know where I'm going to go, right? And it's really hard to manage people like that. How do you give them interesting projects and so on, so that they want to stay? And then it's really important, my last note is, how do you keep people, right? You have to make sure that you're having conversations with people. You have to make sure that they are interested in the work that they are doing. It's just really important. Understanding capacity, knowing when you need to grow your team and when you don't need to grow your team. The worst thing you want to do is hire somebody, and then the person that you had, like a senior designer on your team, was doing wonderful, and you hire somebody to partner with them, and then all of a sudden they have half of the work responsibility and they get bored. And then, 6 months later, they're gone. And so you just have to be mindful of all of those situations.
Sounds great. Thank you. Great points. Fantastic. All right. Last but not least, Umberto, 3 minutes. Tell me how to hire great UX professionals.
Well, most has been already said here. Maybe just a dimension. Like, of course, you want to create such a strong organization that you has the brand, the reputation where talent is coming in, and has been said, and you have actually more ability to choose great people, but also looking at like the gaps, the diversity, different aspects. Like we want really to raise that level of the team to the next tier. So that's one stage of where your organization might be. Not all organization might be already there. So like, I guess in a small startup or in a place where design is being like the head of design has just been brought to build the team from scratch, then maybe a very different situation. So in these cases, I guess that has to be like a full-time job for who wants to do that, and it becomes like a lot of investment in also scouting, in creating personal relationships, in really having that conversation going, so that people can understand the potential of the company. Or like we were talking about understanding the potential of the candidate, but you also, if you want to attract experienced people or great people, because especially at if you don't have yet an established team, yes, you could look at the potential of junior people, like to grow, but you also need some people that have done it before, right? Like when you hire the first wave of people. So then later on, absolutely, like the team scales and grows and actually flourishes, because you're also attracting people that are high potentially, right? But they haven't done it before. They don't have the expertise. Also having programs with interns, with university, and all that is great. But at the beginning, I guess it's important to have people also that can, also establish the practice and can deliver the results, so that internally you can have that, that you can show results, and therefore around that you can build the next wave, right? So yeah, just wanted to say that it may not be the same story for all companies. At the stage where your company is may also play a big role into how you hire.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I think that's all the time we have for questions and discussion, but thank you so much, everybody who's taken part of this. I really appreciate it. Nita, I think you can jump in.
Hi, one more time. Yeah, thank you so much, guys, for taking part in the panel. Me not being a product or UX designer, enjoyed it a lot, and it seems to me like it's been like a YouTube version of Wikipedia for product design, because you discuss so much topics, and it was so, 2 hours. For me, it was like 5 minutes. Thank you so much. And I guess that's it for today. Thank you to the audience for great questions. We really had a lot. Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to Chris for being a great moderator. And see you on next events. Make sure to follow us on meetup.com. You can find us by Wrike Club nickname there. We'll post all the upcoming events. So, and I hope we'll see you guys soon. Thank you so
much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.